I discovered my wife's affair, hired a private investigator, and vanished without a trace before she even had a chance to return home. Emily and I have been married for 8 years. To everyone on the outside, our marriage looked picture perfect. We lived in a charming, well-kept house on a quiet street. Every year, we took vacations together, traveling to beautiful places, creating memories that seemed to strengthen our bond. Friends and family admired us, often saying we were the couple they envied, a model of what a successful, loving marriage should be. But beneath that glossy surface, cracks had started to form, subtle at first, but growing deeper and wider with time. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Missed dinners became more frequent. Emily would text me late, explaining that work had run over or an unexpected meeting had kept her. Late-night work excuses became the norm, and a growing emotional distance between us settled in like an unwelcome guest. I tried to reason with myself, telling myself that this was simply the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. After all, marriages had their ups and downs, and surely this was just a phase. But as the months dragged on, that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the sense of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. One evening, everything changed. We were having dinner, a rare occasion when we were both home together, and I noticed Emily smiling at her phone. It wasn't just any smile. It was soft, secretive, almost intimate. A kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. My heart sank. But I forced myself to sound casual as I asked, "Who's that?" She looked up, startled, her expression shifting too quickly. "Just work," she replied, her voice tight and hurried. Without thinking, she locked her phone and turned her attention back to her plate. But the damage was done. In that moment, something in me snapped. Emily had never been secretive before. We used to share everything. Our thoughts, our dreams, even our phone passwords. There had been a transparency between us, a bond built on trust. Now, there was a wall, and I was determined to find out what she was hiding behind it. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind of suspicion and doubt. I began watching her closely, scrutinizing every detail of her behavior. She was texting more frequently, slipping out of the room to take phone calls, and staying late at work for events she claimed were mandatory. The woman I had fallen in love with, the one who used to curl up on the couch with me to binge watch our favorite shows, had become someone I barely recognized. Her laugh felt hollow, her presence distant, and every moment we spent together was laced with tension. Then came the moment I knew I couldn't ignore. One Friday, she told me she had a business trip coming up. On the surface, it sounded routine. Her job often required travel, but this time felt different. My gut told me not to trust her. The anxiety that had been building inside me reached a boiling point, and I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator named Jack. He was a seasoned professional, calm and direct. When I explained my situation to him, he didn't judge or offer false reassurances. He simply nodded and promised to find out the truth. Days later, Jack called me. His tone was serious, and I braced myself for what I knew was coming. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I have evidence that your wife is having an affair. She's involved with her boss." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. My worst fears had been confirmed, but I still needed to see the proof for myself. When Jack sent the photos, it was as if time stopped. There was Emily, the woman I had built my life around, laughing and holding hands with her boss Greg as they entered a hotel together. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless. This was the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, the person I had trusted with every part of myself, and she had chosen someone else. In the days that followed, I drifted through a fog of anger and heartbreak. My first instinct was to confront Emily, to demand answers, to force her to face the devastation she had caused. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't bring me peace. Confronting her would only lead to more pain and empty words. I needed to take control, to reclaim what little power I had left. I started planning my escape with a cold, calculating precision. I transferred our savings into a separate account, making sure she wouldn't be able to touch it. I gathered all our important documents, passports, bank statements, anything I might need, and made arrangements to stay with a friend in another city. I even resigned from my job, explaining to my boss that I needed a fresh start, far away from here. Every move I made was deliberate, every decision calculated. I wanted to disappear without leaving any loose ends, without giving Emily a chance to explain or justify her actions. I had loved her deeply, but her betrayal had shattered something fundamental between us. If she could deceive me so easily, if she could share her smiles and secrets with someone else, then I owed her nothing. When she returned from her so-called business trip, she would come home to an empty house. I would be gone, without a trace, leaving behind only the silence and the echo of what we had lost. The evening before Emily was due to return from her business trip, the house was unusually quiet. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a blank sheet of paper, knowing that whatever I wrote would change everything. My mind raced, but my heart was resolute. I picked up the pen and began to write, each word carrying the weight of a decision I had been building toward for months. The letter was short, direct, and unyielding. There was no room left for ambiguity or sentimentality. Emily, I know about the affair. I hired a private investigator and have seen the evidence. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I have taken my share of our finances and left the rest for you. Don't try to find me. This marriage is over. Goodbye. Ethan. Once I finished, I placed a letter on the kitchen table where she would see it immediately upon her return. The paper seemed heavy, as though it carried all the years of disappointment and betrayal. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, feeling a mixture of sadness and finality. Then, without looking back, I walked to the bedroom, packed a suitcase with clothes and a few essentials, and zipped it shut. Every sound, the rustle of fabric, the zip of the bag, seemed amplified in the quiet house. I locked the door behind me and stepped outside. The night air was cool, but my chest felt tight with the weight of what I was leaving behind. As I drove away, the familiar streets faded in the rearview mirror. My emotions were a storm within me. Anger at the betrayal, deep sadness for the love that had disintegrated, and an overwhelming sense of relief that I was finally free from the chains of a broken marriage. For years, I had felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a partnership that had long ceased to feel like one. Now, with every mile that passed, I felt like I was shedding an old skin, one that had grown too tight and uncomfortable. I drove for hours, letting the road stretch out in front of me, each mile putting more distance between myself and the life I was leaving behind. Eventually, I found myself in a small town I had never heard of. It felt safe, anonymous, a place where no one knew my name or my story. My friend Mark lived there, and when I knocked on his door, he welcomed me in without hesitation. He didn't ask for details. He simply offered me a place to stay and a space to breathe. It was exactly what I needed. The first few weeks were the hardest. The silence was deafening, and my mind couldn't stop replaying the moments that had led to this. Emily's distant behavior, the late nights she couldn't explain, the damning photos of her with Greg. Each memory was a blade that cut deep. The lies she had told me echoed in my mind, each one unraveling another thread of trust. I found myself questioning everything, wondering how long it had all been a facade. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to heal. I found a job, something simple to keep me occupied and pay the bills. The routine was comforting, a reminder that life could move forward, even after everything fell apart. I avoided social media, knowing that one glance at Emily's profile could undo all the progress I had made. Her attempts to reach me were relentless. Voicemails left unanswered, emails deleted without being read, messages passed along through mutual friends. Each one was a tether to a past I was determined to sever. I knew she wanted to explain, to justify, but there was nothing she could say that would undo what she had done. I refused to respond, refused to let her words pull me back into that world of pain. Months passed, and the sharp edges of betrayal began to dull. The anger softened, replaced by a quiet resolve. I learned to trust again, cautiously, each step forward a fragile victory. Occasionally, I would wonder about Emily and Greg, but I never let myself dwell on it. My focus was on rebuilding, on becoming someone new, someone whole. Then, one day, an email appeared in my inbox. It was from Emily. Seeing her name on the screen made my heart race, but I forced myself to open it. Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I've paid the price. My relationship with Greg fell apart, and every day since, I've regretted what I did to you. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you. Take care. Emily. Her words stirred something inside me, but it wasn't love. It wasn't even anger. It was a sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. She was right. She didn't deserve forgiveness. But the truth was, I didn't need her apology anymore. I had already let go of that chapter of my life. Without hesitation, I deleted the email. It was just another ghost from a past I had already buried. Some might say I was harsh for leaving the way I did, for disappearing without warning or explanation. But I knew deep down that I had done what was necessary. Sometimes, the only way to find peace is to walk away from the pain and never look back.